Well, today we have Jade joining me on Krista Living Sober podcast, and she's here to share her story of addiction and recovery. Why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself and who you are, where you're from?
Well, I'm 31. I recently moved to Florida 4 years ago. I grew up in Massachusetts, Taunton specifically. Pretty much never really went anywhere other than there because kind of seems like when you get stuck in a city, you get stuck there forever. I grew up always helping my mom raise my brothers, and so I had a lot of responsibility in my life, pretty much from a super young age. My youngest brother is 11 years younger than me. I was basically mom number 2, and
So you kind of had to grow up at a really young age and into like an adult role full of responsibilities.
Yes, and my mom was also really ill when I was growing up, so I was taking care of her as well.
That's a lot on somebody who's really young, you know.
Yeah. So that was, I really liked having all that responsibility because I'm a go-getter and like to strive for more and achieve big things. But it was definitely a lot of stress, in my life at a pretty early age.
Oh, yeah. I can imagine. And how old were you?
Well, I was 11 when my youngest brother was born. My middle brother is only 2 years younger than me. I've always kind of been an old soul. So I was always kind of like the really mature one for my age growing up always. So even when I was really little, took a lot of responsibility of helping my brother grow up as well, even before the youngest one came along. So I liked helping with homework and cooking dinner and cleaning the house.
The big sister role.
Yes, exactly.
If you don't mind me asking, what was your mom sick with?
She has an autoimmune disease, and she has fibromyalgia on top of that, and she has neuropathy.
I'm sorry to hear that.
Yeah.
How's she doing?
Well, she has been doing very well up until September when she contracted COVID. And she's luckily over COVID. But with an autoimmune disease, basically when you get sick, it takes you a really long time to recover in comparison to just the average person. When you or I get sick, well, you're pregnant, so we'll leave you out. But when a regular person gets sick, their immune system is able to combat it. And then with her, it just takes longer. And what happens is what her immune system is down, which leaves her open to more illnesses. So she ended up, from the antibiotics that they had to give her, she ended up getting thrush. And then she just had some other complications. So she's still kind of battling the sickness because hers is like a snowball. So once she starts getting sick, she just continues to get sick. But she's on the up and up right now.
That's good.
That's good. Yes.
Yeah. Oh, it's so hard for everybody, this whole COVID, Omicron, whatever it is these days. It's awful.
Well, and it definitely adds to the stress. So, staying sober while super stressed out is part of the trick, right?
Yes. So you just celebrated 2 years. Is that correct?
Yes, ma'am.
What's your sober date?
January 2nd.
Awesome.
So,
yay. So proud of you. That's
right? Awesome. It's funny because when I was in high school and in middle school, I was like super straight edge, and I actually used to make fun of people who did drugs. And I
like looked down on them. You were like, oh.
Yes, I did. I thought I was so much better than them because I was like responsible, and I like, took care of my mom and took care of my brother. And so I felt like, some sort of like I was better than them because I never did anything like that. Mm-hmm. But why not make more money? I'll get another job. And so I really hustled hard pretty much up until I was 18. When I turned 18, because my mom was on housing, because she's a single mom of 3 kids, she was on housing. Her housing started taking my income into account. So because I was working and I had all these jobs,
you were 18?
When I turned 18, I was considered an adult. So my income got wrapped into the housing.
Wow.
That meant I had to pay rent to live at home. So I said, peace out, because I could pay $50 more and go live with my bestie. So when we got our very first apartment, that's pretty much when I decided to start letting loose a little bit.
Okay, so for you, it kind of was like a late bloom sort of start with like the drinking and the drugs and whatever.
Yeah, and I honestly, I never did any drugs for a really long time. I really didn't even drink that often. I only really drank with my friends when they asked me to go drinking, or
like a social, like party, going out type of drinking.
Yeah, and I used to be the kind of person who could have 1 or 2 drinks and that was okay with me and I was cool and I was just fine with that. And then basically I started hanging out with people who were party animals, and being in the restaurant industry is a lot of people drink in the restaurant industry because, you know, it's a tough job and there's alcohol easily accessible after shift. So, you know, you stay and have a drink or two after work.
I know that all so well from working in the restaurant industry.
Right.
It's such a party scene when the restaurant closes down. Like, all I knew from every job I've ever had in the restaurant was drinking after work, partying after work, waking up with a hangover to do it all over again.
Right. And not only that, but like on shift, you know, everybody's talking about where are you going to go get drunk after work, you know? Yeah. So basically, as soon as I turned 21, the very first bar I went to legally as a 21-year-old, my friend knew the bartender, and they made our drink so strong, it was ridiculous. And this was before GPS and before smartphones.
Yeah.
I was following my friend home because I didn't know where we were, because it was like his bar that he wanted to go to, and it was like out in Fall River. So I was following him home, and he was totally hammer-faced, and he was driving exceptionally fast. Oh, no. And I was trying to call him and text him to try to get him to slow down, but he wasn't. And so it got to a point where I actually lost him in front of me. And so the thought went through my head, like, I'm lost in the middle of nowhere. I guess I just need to speed up and catch up to him. Well, that was a poor idea. We both got pulled over. We both got a DUI separately, and both of our cars were new. They both got impounded, but that didn't stop me. So the man who actually had my court case was sick, and he took a really long time. He tried really hard to help me get out of the DUI. And it took 3 years, but in that process of 3 years, I went and got my, I paid the $500 to keep having my license. I ended up moving to Brockton shortly after that. And I just really jumped into the party scene hard. Me and my friends, we used to go out to the bar almost every single night. So we started getting really hammer-faced all the time. And then that was not enough. So that's when the drugs started coming in. One of my friends introduced me to Molly, and we started doing that. And one of my friends that I roomed with at the time, she lost her job, so she decided she was going to sell Molly. So then we bought Molly so that she could pay her rent.
Oh man, the cycle.
So it got really sticky really quick. So we ended up doing Molly for like 6 months straight.
Molly is so crazy. I remember doing that like every single weekend for like a few months straight. Yeah. Not every day, but I would go to work, and then we would go to Ocean Club in Quincy and party. Yep. Yes. And just take
Ocean
Molly, smoke pot, be drunk. Oh my God, it was just, I don't even know how I'm alive. Molly
Yeah.
was straight up crazy shit. I remember when it first came out, it was like the crystallized Molly where you just let it, you would chew it or like put it in a drink or something. And then there was like powder form.
Yeah.
I don't know. That shit was crazy.
My friends taught me the parachute trick where you would put it in a little piece of paper, the crystal,
Okay.
and then you would swallow the whole thing like a pill.
Yeah.
And yeah, that got you messed up pretty quick.
Oh my
because it
God.
went right into your stomach.
Yep.
And then we used to snort it too.
Damn.
So yeah. And then I started doing a lot of coke alongside with the Molly. It just got really crazy, we were partying every single day. My house became a party all the time. So even when I was trying to be good, I would come home from work and there would be a party at my house and I'd have to catch up. A lot of times it was just a lot of chaos and lots of drinking, and we would drink before we went to the bar and then at the bar and then after party after the bar.
Yeah.
Never sleep, go back to work, do it all over again. So there was just a lot. There's a lot. And I actually started dating someone who was selling coke. So then me and him, we stopped going out all the time, but we just like did it all the time. We would sit up and like he would play video games and we would just sit at the house do nothing for hours or days or whatever.
Yeah.
We both had jobs, so we thought we were functioning and doing fine and not having a problem. So, there's just a lot of different avenues that I tried out. Luckily, I did try to take pills one time. Couple times I tried, but I immediately vomited. Thank God I am allergic to them. So
Oh my gosh.
I never went down that avenue.
Yeah. But I
Slowly-
mean, you were doing cocaine and Molly. I mean, that's enough, right?
Oh yeah. Yep. Yeah.
So
And I thought
then
it
when
was
you were
fine. I never thought it was a problem.
you were still drinking while
Oh, yeah.
you were on Molly and sniffing
Oh, yeah.
cocaine and yeah.
Oh yeah. Yep. And I did all that for a long time, and then I decided that I really needed to get sober.
So how long do you think you were using?
At that point, it was probably like 6 years.
6 years.
And then I started dating this kid who was basically a homebody. He never left his house. So I thought it would be perfect because me and him could just chill at his house all the time, and he didn't drink. So we just hung out and watched movies, and he was really fun in a lot of ways that were different from a lot of other people because he didn't drink. So like we did arts and crafts a lot. We used to go on hike. So I stayed sober for a year when me and him got together. And then I decided I was going to go hang out with some friends without him. And I ended up getting really drunk and doing coke.
So did he know about your past?
Yes.
He knew that you were into drugs and that you were drinking before he met you, and he was sober?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
And you guys had like a good relationship?
Yeah. Yeah. Really
Sounds
healthy.
like he kept you out of trouble, and then
He did.
you found it.
He did.
Yeah.
Yeah. But I proceeded to be a terrible human and tell him that I was going to continue to do drugs and he could either break up with me or deal with it.
He gave you an ultimatum. Or you gave him the ultimatum?
I gave him the
Oh, okay.
ultimatum. Yeah.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah. So I pretty much told him, like, I'm going to keep doing drugs. I want to do drugs. And if you don't like it, too bad, so sad.
So from that moment you went back out using, you just knew that like you wanted to continue using and you were like, fuck it. You were like, I'm going to continue using, like my boyfriend doesn't. So that kind of put you in a predicament where you chose the drugs over your relationship?
Yeah, over a healthy relationship.
Yeah.
And he loved me endlessly.
Right.
He would have done anything for me. And he chose to stay with me. Unfortunately, I dragged him down the road with me, and he started using as well. So we continued to do that for a while. And then we moved to Florida. I was supposed to be buying a massage establishment.
Oh yeah, I remember that you were into massaging.
Yep. So I've been a massage therapist now for 13 years.
Okay, you're still doing it?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, awesome.
Yes. The reason I moved to Florida was because I had an opportunity to buy a massage establishment, because with massage, you have to have your license, and in each state, it's regulated differently. In Massachusetts, when I first originally got my license back in 2009, I didn't have to take the national certification exam.
Okay.
But once they said that I did, I was just grandfathered in, so I never had to take the test. But mind you, the NBLEX is a very, very hard test that's pretty much like a nursing exam. So the nursing exam is called the NBLEX, and for massage, it's called the MBLEX. So it's very close.
Right, yeah.
But so basically, I couldn't get my license here in Florida until I took this test. I tried to take the test.
Yeah.
And I failed.
Oh no.
And it was $200 a whack.
Ugh.
So then I studied for 6 months.
Mm-hmm.
And I took the test again. And I failed again. So I said, oh, well, I'm just going to move to Florida anyway. And
so at this point, you were already in Florida, though, right?
No, I hadn't moved
okay.
yet.
You were just...
Yeah.
Okay.
I was preparing to move.
Yep.
So when I got to Florida, I obviously could not buy an establishment for massage without a license for massage. So I kind of was very discouraged and honestly just devastated at the fact that I couldn't buy this business and or get my license doing my career that I've worked very hard for many years to achieve. Right. Even though I was a drug addict and an alcoholic, many of my friends and associates had no idea I had a problem. So I remained pretty, I would say, under the radar for most people. A lot of my family didn't know. A lot of my friends didn't know. Pretty much only the circle that I hung with knew.
So that must have been hard in itself, just like dealing with all that kind of because you were hiding it. You were like isolating the fact that you had an addiction.
Yes.
Yeah.
So it really pulled me away from a lot of my family. The year that I moved to Florida, a couple months before that, my grandfather on my dad's side passed away.
I'm sorry about that.
Thank you. And he had been struggling with cancer for 11 years, but pretty much the previous 6 to 7 years, I was just partying all the time. So I missed a lot of time with him that, I can never get back.
I feel that so much because when my dad had Alzheimer's, like all I did was avoid being in the house and around him and around my mom trying to help him. And it was just like a sad, depressing, miserable atmosphere. And I look back and I'm like, well, I was an idiot because like, why, I was just drinking to avoid all that when I could have been there for him, or I could have just sit there and spend time with him. And I beat myself up about that, so many times, but I forgave myself in sobriety.
Right.
That's hard. It's hard.
It is hard. It really is.
It was the addiction overtaking our lives, and we probably would have been completely different people back then, like who we are now. But
Well, I mean, we would have never met, girl.
I know. But I get that. It's hard.
Yeah, it is hard.
So after that, did it kind of make you want to drink again?
Yeah, so when he passed, that was really devastating. But so what's crazy is actually, so my grandfather passed, and then my mom moved to Florida with both of my younger brothers. At that point in my life, I was kind of like a backup a couple of years, but at that point was really my like worst, because I felt like my mom left because she didn't want my brothers to see the bad influence that I was setting. It really took me down for a while. I ended up actually, I started seeing a therapist, and I started taking some antidepressants because I was in a really bad way. And I had lots of suicidal thoughts, and I just was so disappointed in myself that I continued to do those things, but the disappointment didn't help me stop. It made me want to do it more.
Yeah, you were so full of shame and guilt.
Yes, for sure.
And it just like ate at you, right?
Yeah.
Of course, it didn't want to make us stop. I feel like it kind of almost made us want to do something worse or something more. For me, anyway, that's what happened.
I would agree. And that's really when I started really getting heavy into it.
So while you were like in therapy and taking medication?
Yeah, so it was really bad because then I was on medication, and then I would not drink because the medication and the drinking didn't coincide. So then I started doing a lot more drugs because trying to stay level-headed. You know, it's hard. Your mind is so twisted when you're in that frame of thinking that it really screwed me up for a while. But my dad...
Yeah, that's the obsession.
Right?
We become so obsessed. It's like the compulsion of the addiction. It has its hold on us, and it's so hard to break that compulsion.
It really does. It really is hard. Was still just doing it. I was, being crazy and wild. But my dad kept inviting me to church, and basically he kept begging me to come back to church, because when I was younger, I used to go to church. And when I was 16, I gave my life to Jesus. And then when I was 18, that's when I kind of turned 100% in the opposite direction. And so my dad actually started inviting me to this group called An Alternative to Addiction. So it was called AA, but it wasn't AA.
All right.
And
I don't know if I've heard of that.
It's something that I had never heard of before. The guy...
Is it religious based?
Yes.
Okay.
But it wasn't really about religion. It was just about finding something else to do with your time instead of going out on a Friday night and drinking.
Right.
So the guy who led the group, he actually was an addict for 15 years. And his home church in Jersey had a group like this. And he moved away from Jersey to start over and start fresh and get sober. And he joined our church, and he had brought up to our pastor that he thinks that our church should have some type of group like this. And he said, well, why don't you lead it? Which he was very reluctant to do.
Yeah.
But he was awesome at it. And so seeing him really inspired me, because being addicted for 15 years to anything and becoming clean is a struggle. So
of course, yeah.
One day I just asked him, I'm like, so how the heck am I supposed to just get clean? Like, I don't understand what I'm supposed to do. Like, I wake up and I want to drink every day. And so he said that I needed to ask God to remove that want from my life. And I was like, that's all I have to do? Seriously?
Right.
And
At this point, are you still in denial that you have a problem? Or did you admit it yet?
I mean, I admitted it to them that, like, obviously I was drinking a lot, but I would never necessarily admitted to them that I had a problem, you know?
Right. Yeah.
I went home that night, and I prayed that prayer, and the next morning I woke up and I didn't want to drink. And I was like,
isn't it amazing?
That's weird. So I called my dad and I was like, Dad, what is this hocus pocus that you guys are teaching me? And shortly after is when I found the very kind boyfriend that I was sober for a year with after that. So that was my preface to that year that I was sober with him. And then I decided, you know, when we moved to Florida, that my number one goal was that I needed to get back to church, because that's really what helped me want to be sober in the first place. So for me, church and sobriety kind of went hand in hand. My main goal was to find a good church family here. And that was pretty much my only goal when I got here, other than just, you know, trying to figure out what I was going to do with myself, because the only thing else that I was good at that I knew of other than massage therapy was waitressing. So, you know, so I got a couple waitressing jobs. Actually, the very first month I was here, I had $1,000 saved. So I didn't work, and I just literally partied for an entire month. I went out every day. We just went ham for a whole month.
With that boyfriend that you had?
Uh-huh. And then
so you didn't get into church when you got to Florida?
I did start going to church. I was going to church every Sunday.
Yeah, every Sunday, but you were partying, like.
But I was still partying every day. So it was a little, you know.
Yeah.
I was in church crying almost every Sunday because I just
felt guilty.
And I didn't know how to change my behavior. You know, I
remember feeling I was so judged every Sunday in church from the life I was living, because it was nothing the life they portray that churchgoers should have. So I always felt so, like, dirty, and like I would burst into flames, but
luckily that's not how things work.
No. No, I got my faith back too, and I believe that, like, you need faith, a lot of faith in your higher power, in God, to be able to recover from addiction. Spirituality is such an important factor in some way.
Yeah.
And it doesn't have to be God, but
knowing that you can't do it by yourself. I think the reason why having faith helps people in sobriety is that because we basically already think that we suck. So how are we supposed to do anything? You know, I mean, most people who are addicts have really bad self-esteem. Whether or not they portray that they have good self-esteem. I mean, look at both of us. We're young, pretty women, you know, I mean, we've got great self-esteem, but, you know, we hate ourselves on the inside. And that's why you did those things, because, you know, there's something that you either went through that, or
it stems from trauma.
Exactly.
It's definitely childhood trauma.
Yeah.
And even if we don't think we went through anything when we're younger, there was something there. There's something that made us the way we are.
Yeah. And like, even sometimes it's stuff that, you know, we just maybe never addressed, and it maybe wasn't even that bad of a thing, but if you don't address the truth.
But when you're a child, what do? You push it down. You conceal it. You get over it quickly, right? Because you don't know what to do with those emotions.
Right. It's really TMI, and I mean, I don't talk about it all the time, obviously, because it's not a super fun conversation to have with everybody, but I was also sexually abused as a child. So I just thought, you know, let me just stuff that down. I'll pretend like it never happened. So actually, the same year that my grandfather died and my mom moved to Florida, I actually took my abuser to court that year as well.
Wow. That's gonna leave you severe trauma that you don't even know how to deal with until you're older. How do you deal with that as a child?
Right.
And
how do you deal with it as an adult,
I feel like, they say, like, at that age, like, when you're younger, anything traumatic like that it's gonna do something with your brain chemistry to prevent it from developing the way it should. So, with that missing.
Yeah. My dad always used to, like, never understand, like, why I couldn't make friends, and that I always wanted to have a boyfriend, and, I was so concerned with being with someone, but I think that subconsciously my brain was just like, this is what you're supposed to do, and, like, you need to be loved, and I made a lot of poor choices subconsciously that I didn't know were affecting my mentality, and I always told myself, like, I'm never going to let it affect me, and I'm going to, just rise above it. But those things, I know that it had a lot to do with why I became an addict and why I was an alcoholic, because I just didn't want to deal with those things. It was hard.
Of course. This reminds me so much of, like, something I was watching. I can link it in this video for everybody, but it was another guy's podcast. He was interviewing Dr. Gaber Mate. I'll link it in the video. That he wrote a book called Hungry Ghosts, and it's all about addiction and trauma, where it stems from our childhood, and how it affects us becoming addicted to anything, whether it's drugs or sex or gambling, whatever it may be, like, and how it affects our brains growing up. And it was so interesting, but it's so true. I'll link the book too. It sounds interesting. I want to read it.
Right?
Yeah.
And I love the psychology behind it too, like,
let me see what it says. He was saying, like, you've heard of the Buddhist wheel of life?
I haven't.
How there's different realms that we're all in. So I guess there's a human realm, and that's our ordinary selves, our everyday selves. And then there's the animal realm, which is our drives, our appetites sexually, the need to eat. And then there's the hell realm, which is suffering, rage, despair, and terror. And then there's the hungry ghost realm, and that's like the realm before hell or death. But that's where there's there's like ghosts with small tiny mouths, and just like skinny and empty, and they're always hungry, always haunting around this realm, like looking for something to fill them up, and they're always looking for fulfillment, and they're never able to achieve it. And it's said that everybody is supposed to go through the ghostly realm at some point in their life.
Wow.
Yeah, it's kind of haunting, but he went on to explain, like, so much about how, like, all this stuff stems from our childhood, from trauma, from all this stuff, and how it affects addiction. It's so interesting.
Wow. That is really interesting. Yeah. I think that too, like, that kind of stuff, like, is so overlooked because people are scared to talk about their pasts, know? I mean, not like it's a fun
sometimes there's no one to
topic.
talk to for some people.
Right. Well, I think, like, social media has allowed people to be able to have a platform to kind of say things that maybe they wouldn't have a conversation with somebody in person with,
Oh, I agree, yeah.
I think that really, sometimes that could be a good thing or a bad thing.
Right.
Because, they kind of get, like, they're hidden behind a screen,
Yeah.
And so there's security in that, and whether or not they use that security for good or bad is, obviously based on their trauma too.
Yeah. It is so accessible these days. It's right at our fingertips, right? The recovery scene online has been so amazing ever since starting this podcast, and just meeting so many other addicts who are struggling. It's amazing to hear everyone's story, but also the community online. Like, it's right there, you know, and I'm
Right.
sure like it helped a lot when COVID hit, when meetings ended, when you couldn't go to wherever you went for the connection that helped. So it's amazing.
Yeah, I think that social media, like, and the intention of the original intention of it, you know, was so that we can communicate with people all over the world with similarities, you know? I mean,
Right.
that's really what is so cool about it, is that we can have conversations with somebody in a whole nother country about their sobriety. Maybe we met them through Facebook, you know? It's
Yeah.
just one of those things that is interesting. And
Connection.
yeah.
But it's a form of connection, I feel like also mentioned earlier in what I was studying, but like how sometimes we don't have that connection when we're younger or
Yes.
even when we're older, and it's just we feel so isolated and alone, so it's always like good to surround
Right.
yourself by connection. But and I can see how like online that becomes dangerous.
Mm.
But
Well, also too, you know, like sometimes people will use it as a coping mechanism. I know a couple of people personally who they'll literally say to me, I'm having a bad day, let me post something on Facebook so I can get some communication from my friends.
right.
Instead of saying on their Facebook, I'm
That's
having a
me.
bad day.
That's
No, no,
me.
no, but see,
It's
you're
so
good
easy
about
to
it.
do it though. You know what I mean? Like it's so
But
easy for us to be in our feelings and then to type it out and post it. And it's
but
just like,
that's
oh, I
good.
always delete it, but it's not good.
Oh, see, I think it's good to express what you're
I mean, it
actually
is.
feeling,
It
you
is.
know, because then your friends know that you're upset, right? And so they're going to reach out to you and try to comfort you. That I
Yeah.
think is totally a great way to use
Yeah,
social
that's
media.
true. That's true.
But I'm talking about when people don't actually express how they feel and they just use it as a way to get something,
I
you know,
see.
like they want to feel good, they want to feel better. So they're like, let me
Yeah,
post a selfie of myself so that I can get a zillion likes on it.
I
Or
see.
let
Like
me,
superficial. Yeah.
and it's that's a bad coping mechanism
Yeah.
because, you know, we can use it in a different form to feel better about ourselves. And realistically, like you said, it's very superficial. There's no reality to it. It's not, they're not being transparent about why they're really trying to get attention, you know? And I think that that's hard for people sometimes too, because those are coping mechanisms that we learn growing up. My brother has ADHD, and one of the things that me and him struggled with was that, like, I was always a goody two shoes.
Mm-hmm.
And so in school, I excelled in school. I was an A+ student all through school. But my brother really struggled in school, and it was very difficult for him. For somebody like him in school behind me, he basically felt like the only way he could get attention was negative. So he would act out in a negative way to receive more attention. You know, and a lot of
Yeah.
people
A lot of
do
people
that.
do that.
It's all about, as adults, what can we do about it now to change these coping mechanisms, to address them, to be aware. I think part of the biggest part about being sober is that your feelings are no longer masked with anything. You cannot mask them with anything. It's just they
Right.
smack you in the face all day long, and you just have to take it.
Oh,
So,
yeah. That is the good and the bad thing about sobriety. You get sober and you're like, oh, what are these emotions? Because you know you're not stuffing them down, you're not drinking them away, you're not taking drugs to numb them.
yep.
Head on.
Yeah. And if you don't have that support system,
Yeah.
that's really where I think a lot of people, that's why sobriety can be so difficult, is
Mhm.
that they don't reach out. First of all, they don't admit that they had a serious problem.
Right. You need to do that first. You need
Because
to come to a place where you know that your life became unmanageable and that you're powerless, right?
right. I think that's actually the hardest step.
It is.
I mean, truly,
Nobody wants to
even,
admit any of that.
I mean, no one. I mean, I didn't want to admit that I had a problem.
Me neither.
And
It took me
especially,
how long? Until I was 29.
right.
From 12. And then it took me all this time, 3 years ago, for me to finally admit that My life is unmanageable. I am powerless. I need help.
Yeah. Right.
Why so long?
Because it's tricky. Really coming to the conclusion that like I did this to myself. I made the choices to put myself in this situation and to say, okay, you did that, but now what are you going to do to get up? Admitting that you made a bad decision or a bad choice, and made many probably. You can make good choices in the opposite direction, you know? That's definitely the hardest part, I think, is that people don't find the support that they need when they do admit that they have a problem. Because finding that support, even if it's...
But it's also, you have to be willing to get the help. You know what I mean? Like, no one's going to force you if you're not ready, if you're not willing to get the help. Because
Yeah.
so many times people are like, hey, the help's here. The help is there.
Mm-hmm.
But that person's like, oh, well, not right now. Like, or they're not ready, you know?
Well, because they don't want to admit that they have a problem.
And that's just such a tricky slope.
It is. Yeah. And learning also in sobriety that other people have to ask you for help, that you can't fix other people. No,
you can't.
In their trauma, in their spiral, in their mess, you know, they have to decide that they're ready. Like you said, they have to decide that they're ready to truly admit it's time to change.
Right. What were the steps that you took to get clean and sober?
So it's funny, this time getting sober, because there was that one time I did the year sober, and then there was another time I went 6 months with no drugs, but I still drank. And the drugs went off and on for a long time. They weren't consistent. That's why I thought I didn't have a problem.
It's not like I do it all the time, right?
Right.
Just making
I only did it on the weekends. It's fine.
So I wanted to know what steps you took to get sober.
When I got sober this time, it was funny. I went to an AA meeting with a guy that I thought was cool, and I went in support for him. So okay. My very first meeting that I went to down here in Florida. Now, when I had gotten my DUI in Massachusetts, I was actually required to go to many AA meetings, but I hated them and I thought they were stupid, and I got no benefit from them whatsoever.
I agree. Like when you first start going to AA meetings, when you have to, or you're just
like, court mandated.
Exactly. Right. I was too. Oh. My first experiences were like, you have to, and it's just like, ugh.
Like, you're why? Like, let me get through this meeting so I can get my signature and get out of here.
Did you still drink or do any
of
that?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I still drank the whole time. Yep. Time. I went, and the reason that he had been going was actually because he was court mandated, which I found out later. I decided that I was going to go in support with him. And the very first meeting that me and him went to, I was like, wow, I really need to hear all that stuff. Like, it really impacted me. So I was like, can I come back with you tomorrow? And he was like, yeah. So I decided that I was going to go back tomorrow. And then I went every single day for a week because I felt like I was like, Did you have
a sort of spiritual awakening happen? Would you call it that, or not yet?
I think that my spiritual awakening really happened more at church. At that point in time, I was going to a church consistently, and I had actually just recommitted my life to Christ. I had just got rebaptized.
Okay.
I was really feeling close to God. Like, I felt really close to God. But I wasn't sure what steps I needed to take to truly stop drinking, to really change my life, right? Over that week, it was like smacking me in the face that this is what I could do. This is something that I could do to really, truly make a change, to actually step up and make that change. So when I decided to make that change, basically I went every single day for that 1 week. And at the end of the week, I got my white chip. And the white chip is the chip of commitment, to make your commitment to stop drinking. I was scared because I knew I really needed to stop. But in that moment, I decided that if I was going to quit drinking, that I was also going to quit drugging. I was going to quit both of them at the same time, cold turkey. And
cold turkey.
Yep. Cold turkey. So
And then what happened?
So then I stayed.
You quit cold turkey for how long?
Till now.
Really?
That's how it worked. Yep. I had tried so many
cold
times.
turkey, meaning you had AA, right?
Yeah.
And then
I did have
did
AA,
you have a sponsor? Did you do the steps? Yeah, okay. No worries. Nope. But you had AA, you had church.
I had church.
You had like your own little.
That was my way of doing it. I truly honestly believed that it wasn't AA that really made me quit drinking. It was really my want to stop. I truly think that my will to be a better person, like I didn't want to be the person who flaked on work. I didn't want to be the person who would commit to something and didn't show up. I didn't want to be the kind of person who was constantly I'm still always late, so I can't say that I'm ever on time to anything now, but
it's okay. We all have these character defects. Those don't go away.
No. But I think that I had this strong will to just not be a crappy person anymore. I didn't want to be a liar all the time because I was constantly hiding what I was doing, and I was just living a double life, and I was tired of it. It was tiring, to be honest. It was exhausting, and I was so exhausted that I wanted to give it all up. So I decided that when I made that commitment that I truly was going to live a better life, that I was going to be the type of person that somebody could rely on again, that I had to work on a lot of things because I realized that, amongst the being late, I have plenty of other character flaws that I want to work on. So,
right.
So my steps.
It's amazing that you knew that, though. I think it takes a lot of people a lot of time before they get there. You know what I mean?
Well, I would say, between the 6 and 10 years, that 4 years of time that I wanted to get sober, I knew I needed to get sober. But it was just really hard. And I thought moving would make it easier, but I just created a new reckless life here. So it didn't really make it easier. But when I decided to
because you weren't ready then.
Right.
Yeah.
I thought I was ready, but I wasn't. 4 years of quitting off and on over that time period, and I went like a month here and there. I went 2 months here and there. I went 3 months here and there. It just never stuck because I wasn't ready. I wasn't true to the commitment. Mm-hmm. I also never tried to quit both at the same time.
So hard. I mean, they say do one at a time so you don't get.
But when I did one, I wanted to do the other.
But I mean, and that's good.
So mine was like, if I did this, then I wanted to do that. So, and if I did that, then I wanted to do this. So I learned that if I need to quit, then I have to quit both. And that's just the way it has to be. And that's the way that I became successful in it, was because I went to church every Sunday. I actually started going to church on Wednesdays, and I was going to a Bible study. So I was going to church like 3 times a week. I was going to meetings at least 3 times a week.
But you had a foundation built, which is very helpful.
I tried.
Church and meetings, that's a great foundation to have when you're trying to do the recovery journey.
And I had a lot of support from my family.
And that's amazing too.
Which
Like, you need that support.
I know a lot of people don't get support from their family.
Yeah.
And I know that can be one of the hardest things. To this day, still thank my dad and my stepmom for praying for me every day when I was in that hot mess of a life, because I don't know how I survived, to be 100% honest. I
hear you.
Yeah. I mean, me and you had some crazy reckless times when
I remember.
we were together.
We partied. We did crazy shit. Sobriety is amazing. And congratulations again on your 2 years.
Thank you.
But yes, compared to how we were back then and now, total difference. What sobriety can do for you in life after living in addiction, and if you do come to the awakening, if you do come over to the light from the dark, amazing things happen. You even look different. You sound different. You feel different. Everything around you is like brighter. It's just, it's magical.
So, okay, it's so funny that you say that, like everything around you is brighter. So, when I first got sober, I actually described it as, I've never taken acid before, but when my friends tell me what acid feels like, they say that you just like, you think everything is so beautiful and you admire the world. And I'm like,
you do.
How like, see, you know, but
it's not really like that, but yeah.
But that's how you think it is, right? But like, I felt like I was almost like in this alternate universe because I was finally in reality. Do you know what I mean? Like, I could
we're
finally
in like the living realm. We're alive.
Right.
Before
and I was like
the hungry,
in the dead realm.
The hungry ghost. We were like just surviving, just existing, trying to survive.
Yes. I think it was a wild concept to me, and I had explained it to multiple people. I would look around and I'd be like, it's so green, like the grass is so green, and like the trees are so beautiful, and the sky is so gorgeous. And granted, I live in Florida, so it's a lot easier to do that here than it is in New England. But it was like I had this new appreciation for life, you know?
Mm-hmm. It's like beautiful.
I
remember there was one time I was still at the Salvation Army and it was snowing, and I caught like the snowflakes in the palm of my hand, and I remember looking down, and it never happened to me before, but I saw the snowflakes for what like snowflakes look like the little crystals, and each one was different. And I saw that at the time. Me and this person there used to like call moments like that God shots, and it was just a moment where I was like, wow, like I'm sober. Is it because I'm sober that I can see these crystals, the snowflakes as they are, or what is happening? Like I've never experienced that beautiful thing before, but now we get that in so many different ways.
Yeah, it's almost like a veil has been like lifted. Like you can truly see what's going on around you because you're looking.
Yep.
Because when you're
we were so blind. We were blind before, blinded in our addictions.
When you're in your addiction, you're hiding from the world all the time, and you're just like, you're in this little bubble and you don't want anybody to know what you're doing, and you're like, you cut yourself off from reality. You know, living in a sober world, it's like I have a new life. And I mean, I obviously think that comes from getting to know God better too. Like for me, that's
I agree.
My travel has really changed because I want to be a more loving person. I want to be a more understanding person. I want to help others. I don't want to be selfish. I feel like I'm able to do those things because I'm not so self-absorbed now.
Yeah.
So look at you with your podcast. I see that you see that.
Well, I wanted to start this so I could get my story out there, because I know so many people have stories, and one of my things is feeling alone, and I felt like I don't want other people to feel alone like that, because it's miserable, it's dark. And if I can just put it out there and talk to other people and maybe they can listen. And so far I've had people come to me and say like that, you know, how do I get sober? Like this helps them. Like, and it's a beautiful, rewarding thing where you help others. And I think when we do come to the sober lifestyle, it's what we want to do.
Yeah.
Is there any advice that you want to give the audience or listeners if they are still struggling in their active addictions?
I would say that if you're still struggling in your active addiction, that you're not alone. You know, there are so many people who are struggling, but there are people you can reach out to. And even if you reach out to somebody and you're not necessarily ready to admit that you have a problem, just to talk to somebody who is sober and who wants to help you. You know, reaching out to everyone isn't always a healthy way to get sober. If you reach out to your friends who are also in it, if they're drinking, if they're drugging, and you tell them that you want to get sober, you're not going to get a lot of support. You may.
Right.
You
might. There's a few of them that are like, okay, like, I understand, like, it's so important to you, but then it's just, I
but they're going to still,
they're going to use, they're going to continue to use and drink, and they get it, but they're not going to get sober. And
they're not ready.
Helpful because they're not ready.
Exactly.
You need to surround yourself
yourself with other like-minded people. Yeah. So I know that meetings sound like the dumbest, stupidest thing ever in the whole freaking world.
Old men in the church basement drinking coffee. No, I'm kidding.
But that's what you think it is when you're in it. Like you really,
I know.
You don't see how it can truly help you, right? But surrounding yourself with other people who are also struggling and want to be sober. That is my biggest advice, is that it's not necessarily a meeting, it's not necessarily church, but those are the two things that really helped me, being around like-minded people who want to be better. And we're still all broken. So if you go to church and you got crappy people around you, guess what? Don't be surprised, because church is full of broken people.
Right.
If you go to a meeting and there's somebody out in the parking lot doing a shot, guess what? Don't be surprised, because we're all broken. You know, don't judge other people. Just ask for help. You know, don't suffer alone. That's my biggest advice, is that I didn't reach out to people when I could have. And even when people reached out to me, like you said earlier, you know, like there's people out there that wanted to help me.
Yeah.
But I didn't want their help because I was afraid. When you make that decision that you really do want to change, turn to the people that have always been there for you, that are a solid support system, that do love you. Like,
there's always somebody. Always.
Yeah.
It's hard to see sometimes, but there is always someone there.
Right. And there is always at least one person you can turn to in your support group in your life that is going to be a good support to you. And
sometimes you do have to find it in strangers, and that's okay.
And that is okay. Right. That's why I loved meetings.
Yeah.
I wasn't ready to tell my family that I was a drug addict.
Right.
But I could tell a room full of strangers that I did drugs, because that's easier for me, you know?
Oh, yeah.
So.
You have to come on for like part 2 or something.
Yeah.
I love talking to you.
Yes, anytime.
This is great.
For sure.
Awesome. Well, again, I am so proud of you. And thank you for coming on my podcast.
Thank you for having a podcast for us to be able to do this on, you know, and spreading love for others.
Yeah.
For real.